Hey there, welcome to part 3 of this introductory series on web development. So if you've been following along with this series so far, you should have a basic working understanding of the different parts that make up a web page, and probably an idea of how the internet works in general. Enough to know what a web page is, hopefully. And that's good enough for what we're going to be doing today, which is building our first website. So to get started with our website, we are going to use this tool called NodeJS. And what NodeJS claims they are is a JavaScript runtime built on Chrome's V8 JavaScript engine. What I say they are is they're a tool that lets you run JavaScript outside of your web browser. Because if you haven't noticed, all the JavaScript we've run, and usually what people mean when they talk about JavaScript, pure JavaScript, is browser side, which means it's running in the context of a browser. For example, someone goes to your website and they push a button and a browser alert pops up, right? That's JavaScript at work. But it's running like that because there is a browser, and it knows what the browser is. What Node.js does is it will let us write JavaScript without a browser. And this will help us do a lot of handy things, like, for example, running a web server. So with that out of the way, just go to nodejs.org and hit download on the recommended version. Try to avoid the current version unless there's a specific feature in there you need, because usually the current versions are filled with bugs. Just go for the recommended version. I'm not going to download either of them because I already have Node.js installed on my computer. And I will prove that by coming here and typing node-v. And if you've installed it correctly from the website, you should see your version pop up. I'm using 14.17 right now. Now, if you've installed it correctly, you should also have installed a second program, which it didn't prompt you for, but it installed on your computer anyway. And this second program is called NPM, or Node Package Manager. And Node Package Manager is a way for you to use other people's code in your Node project. And so if you type npm-v, you should also see a version pop up. Now, there are tons of developers for Node all over the world. And some of these developers like to release code that they've made. And this code is sometimes helpful, sometimes not. But the important part is if somebody's written something helpful, we can access it using npm, as long as they've made it, public and accessible. So the first thing we're going to use is this piece of code that somebody made called Express. And Express is a web framework in the Node environment that will allow us to make a website using Node. And this is very good, because if we were trying to make a website from scratch, we'd have to code the connections, we'd have to code basically a whole bunch of stuff that's very complicated, and we don't want to worry about it. So we let someone else worry about it and just use their finished product. So we want to type npm install or sudo npm install if you need administrator privileges. And then we want to install express-generator with this -g flag. -g tells us to install this on the entire computer, not in any specific folder. You can access it anywhere in the entire computer. And this is good because we haven't made our project folder yet. And so if you just hit enter, we will have installed Express Generator. And Express Generator is just a tool that someone made to simplify the creation of an Express app. And the Express app is an app that will help you make your website. And so what you want to do is just go somewhere where you want your website folder to be. I'm going to go to desktop. I'm going to type Express, and then I'm going to come up with a name for my website. In this case, I want to use a website about turtles. So I just make my project called Turtles. Next, this step varies depending on personal preference, but I like to set my view engine to Pug. And a view engine is a way for Express to render HTML dynamically. And what this means is, depending on the calculations done by your website's backend, it will decide what to show on your screen. For example, if you go to Twitter and you log in, it's going to display your profile, not someone else's profile. And that stuff is dynamically computed and generated. And so it's not static HTML documents, it's some HTML, and then your computer will decide what data to fill in. And it does that using something called a view engine, which is what we're setting right now. We're setting it to the Pug view engine, which is a simple view engine that you can get started with. So I'm just going to generate my app now. And now if I see I have the Turtles folder, I'm going to enter the Turtles folder. And there's a lot of stuff inside. For accessibility's sake, I'm also going to open the Explorer so we can get a visual look at what the folder looks like. Great, now we've generated our first Express app. So now we have our Turtles website folder. And inside we have a lot of things. We have bin, public, routes, views, app.js, and package.json. So let's go over each of these. Bin has this file called www, and this is a file that we're not really going to touch right now. It's just the code to set up the web server. And so we're just going to leave everything as is. We can see here it's creating a server, it's setting a port, and all that good stuff. Public is where we're going to put all our images, JavaScripts, and style sheets. So we can see right now it just has a default style.css. And this can be configured as you go, depending on what you want your website to look like, or what images you want your website to have. All that stuff will just go in public. Routes. So here there are two JavaScript files, index.js and users.js. And what these are is, these are routers for you to send people to different HTML files, or rather just to send different data depending on what part of the website people are accessing. So for example, if we just take any website, such as NodeJS.org, we'll just use this as the example. If you click on a button, you go to a different page within the website. We're now on the download page. If we click this one, we're on Get Involved, right? And so there's a lot of different pages that make up a website. And the router lets you handle navigation in your website. It lets you decide what page to show your user depending on what the back of the web address is. This part right here, the en/get-involved. So as we can see, if there's nothing at the back of the web address right now, if there's just the slash, it's going to render this index file, which brings us to views. We have error.pug, index.pug, and layout.pug. And these are views. These are essentially simplified HTML files. If you look at the actual contents, a lot of it is just HTML without the fancy brackets and stuff. We have HTML, we have head, we have body, all that stuff. And it's just written like this because it's a different syntax. And these are the files that are going to be converted into HTML and then displayed by our view engine, which is why they're named Pug, because we're using the Pug view engine. And so index will be rendered this index file will be turned into an HTML file and sent back whenever someone tries to access just the default website without anything special after the website name, with just a slash. Next, we have app.js. This just has a bunch of functionality that might be useful that they've decided to include by default. We don't really need to worry about this right now. It's a lot of settings, and as we can see, it has an error handler as well. But it's there for whenever you want to add more functionality to your website. If you want to include something that people have made, you put it here, and you tell it to use it here. And finally, we have package.json. Package.json is like a configuration file. All the different packages that we're using are listed here along with their versions. We have the name of our project, the version of our project, and scripts, which is where we can declare custom command line commands and give them shorthands. For example, if I don't want to type all this, I can just type start. And so package.json is a very important file because it lets you share the configuration of your website, which is essential if you're going to be working with someone else and you need to send files back and forth and somebody doesn't know exactly what you're using. This will make it all clear. Alright, so now that we've gone through the entire file structure, we should get ready to run our website, or at least the default one that this project is made with. So the first thing we want to do is actually install all of these dependencies, because even though it generated the project, it didn't actually install any of these things yet. And we need them for our website because we've been referencing them in the generated code already. So just come here to the terminal, and once you're in your project directory, I'm in Turtles, type npm install. And this will install all the dependencies that we have listed. And they'll be put in a folder called Node Modules. The reason there are more than just these is because some of these dependencies have other dependencies. And that is to say, these projects depend on other projects, and so those projects need to be installed too, and then those projects might depend on other projects, and vice versa. So these are all the installs, but we just let the Node project manager worry about that. We don't really need to worry about it ourselves. So once this is done, what we can do is we can type npm start, and as you can see, this will run this start script, which is actually just shorthand for node./bin/www, which is just a command to run this file. But what it does is it will start our web server. So if we go to our browser and we go to 127.0.0.1:3000, we will see we now have our default website. And just for reference, 127.0.0.1 is the same as localhost. It's the default for whenever you're just running a website on your computer. And 3000 is the port number that was set in the settings. That just means we're accessing our website at a specific port in the server. We could change this to something else in here, but we don't really want to worry about that. The technical aspects aren't that important right now. Just know that this is where you go to access your website. And now we actually have one more thing that we want to install. And this is a very useful tool called NodeMon. And NodeMon is essentially just a tool that makes it so whenever you save your code, your website will refresh automatically without you having to go and manually rerun your server. the changes will be automatically updated on your website. So what we're going to do is we're going to do npm install nodemon --save-dev. And the save-dev command, you'll see what it does once this finishes installing. We've just installed nodemon, but it's under dev dependencies, not dependencies. And the difference is dev dependencies, when you're deploying your website onto the wide internet, this won't be installed. Because nodemon is really just a tool for us to use while we're developing, right? That's why it's only useful for when we're saving code. So you don't really need it once you finish your website. And so that means it goes under dev dependencies. Because once you've put your website on the internet, whoever's hosting your website isn't going to install it since they don't need it. So now what we can do is we can make a new command. And the way to do that is very simple. We just put a comma here and we start a new one. And we'll call this dev start. And for this, it's the same thing. It's just we're going to use nodemon instead of node. So nodemon-bin/www. And now, if we type npm run dev start, we cannot type start. In fact, the only reason we were able to just type npm start earlier is because start is hard-coded in as a script. But when we add our own custom scripts, we have to include the run. So npm run dev start. We hit enter. And our website is back up. And now, if you see, we can make changes to this. For example, I say, let me add a new paragraph here. Welcome, video watchers. And I save this. And I refresh. It's automatically updated on here, which is very nice for us. Alright, finally, I'm going to give you explanation of Pug, how it works and what it's used for. So the first thing you might notice when you're looking at this Pug file is it looks awfully similar to an HTML file. It has h1 and it has p. And the reason is, behind the scenes, Express and the Pug view engine is converting this to an HTML file, as I believe I mentioned earlier. The only difference is, instead of, well, not the only difference, the first big difference is, instead of having opening and closing tags, we just have opening tags. And we don't really even have tags per se. It's just the element name, and then a space, and then your content after that. I also want to mention that spaces are actually important in Pug now. Because there are no closing tags, Pug relies on spaces to determine if one element is inside another. For example, my header and my paragraph are inside block content because they have two spaces afterwards. And so you want to be really careful with how you're using your space. If you end up following along and something in your page isn't working, it's probably because you screwed up a white space somewhere. And so just be mindful of that. Now, there are some things to Pug that don't appear in HTML. And that's this part. It extends layout and block content. To understand what these things do, let's take a look at one of the websites that uses this kind of functionality. And that website is Wikipedia. Um, Let me go to Wikipedia. Now, if you actually look at Wikipedia is divided into a few different parts. We have this sidebar over here. It has a bunch of links. We have this search bar over here. Then we have the articles right here. Now, if I were to turtles, for example, this part doesn't change. This part doesn't change. This part changes. And so, originally, back when new engines were not invented, what people might do is they might hard code these parts into every single HTML file. And now, for obvious reasons, that's a bad idea. If you're running a big web page with tens of thousands of files, and you want to make a change to the sidebar, for example, adding a new link, you would have to go in and individually change every single file. Now, no one ever wants to do that, right? So instead, now what we have are these things called templates. So, for example, I have this file. It's called layout.pug. And it just has some template code. This code that I want to not change between pages. And then I have index.pug. And this thing extends the layout file. So what this means is the contents of this index file are going to be placed in layout whenever index is rendered. And so it brings us to this block content. You'll notice that index.pug and layout.pug, they both have content. And what this means is one of the two block content is going to be moved into the other block content on the other file. For example, either this block of content is going to be placed where block content is here, or this block of content, which is currently empty, is going to be placed in this block of content here. And which one is placed where depends on which file is extending the other file. This index file is extending the layout, which means the block of content in the index file is going to be placed where block content is in the layout file. And now we're extending index, it would be the opposite way around. And so if we take the analogy back to Wikipedia, this part and this part, all of this that's not the article, would be the layout, and this would be the block content we have in our index. And as we go to different places, this sidebar stuff and this header stuff doesn't change, but the block of content does. Now, if I give you a demonstration with our current website, I'll just show you how this works.